thanks so much for being here. We're looking forward to doing an afternoon of chamber music, and we'll invite our first performers onto the stage. Good. Very beautiful. So, what are the things that you've been struggling with in this piece?
Maybe being together on that trill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a tricky thing. There's another very similar motion with a trill to the recap in the first movement of the Archduke Trio, where there's a bunch of trills and then suddenly it just melts into the recapitulation theme. What else have you been having trouble with?
I mean, we've been working a lot on dynamics and
Mm-hmm.
shaping, and it's sometimes hard when a section starts forte,
Mm-hmm.
and then we still need to grow,
Mm-hmm.
but it's hard to grow starting at forte, so just kind of dealing with those kinds of things,
Mm-hmm.
but staying true to Beethoven's markings.
That's the hardest thing sometimes. What about for you pianistically?
I think sometimes making difference between the violinist and me.
Yeah, and sometimes not,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes you guys are supposed to sound exactly like each other, and then sometimes very different. I have some general things. I think the first thing is, sometimes I think when we're playing Beethoven, or actually any composer for that matter, but especially in Beethoven, we have to be cautious about the palette of sounds and expressive devices that are from the future, right? So things that maybe you know how to do because you've played Schumann, you've played Mendelssohn, you've played Brahms. And of course, it's not sacrilegious to contemplate what that brings in terms of dimension, but I think sometimes what happens is that we start relying on certain colors and sounds that are maybe would have been foreign to him. And I think it's important to think from that perspective, from his world, which would have been a world with Haydn, with Mozart, I think also his character is a kind of a critical component. There was a count who was very supportive of Beethoven, and he used to hang out at this count's, palace or whatever. And there's this story about Beethoven. He was premiering the Opus 11 clarinet trio, clarinet, cello, and piano. And there was a pianist whom he had a bit of a rivalry with, Steibelt. Have you ever heard that name, Steibelt? He was this insane virtuoso. And it seems, the tale goes that Beethoven saw Steibelt yawning during the performance. And it really made him angry. And so Beethoven went over and grabbed the score of a quintet that Steibelt had written and put it on the piano upside down and made an improvisation based on the upside down tune. And Steibelt got so angry that he just stormed off. And I think that's so telling about the character of Beethoven, that he would try to basically humiliate someone else just because of they weren't paying attention. And I think that shows how much it meant to him capturing the audience's attention. And I think as you guys were playing, I thought you're doing a really nice job in general, and you're being very respectful about so many of the markings. But the one thing that I wonder about is, can we find a way to create an even more intense flavor? I think about sometimes chefs, when they make a sauce, right? We think about making a sauce and you cook it and then you just you're done, right? When you deal with professional chefs, the amount of boiling down of things that they do, so they'll create the sauce and they'll say, reduce by half. So you leave it on the stove and it reduces. And then you add some stuff, add some cream, add some spices, reduce by half. And then keep reducing by half. And suddenly what you end up with is something that's so concentrated and intense. And that's what I'm wondering if we can see about being really specific about sound and color. What is your feeling about the key? This is not a normal key for a piece for violin, right? Not a lot of pieces in F major. There's a Mendelssohn violin sonata in F major. But what's the meaning of this key? Do you have any idea? Not sure. So, always good to contemplate keys, I think in all music, but especially in people like Beethoven, Mozart, Bach. It gives us an idea of what they're thinking about, right? F major can be a very grand key. So for example, may I sit down? So there's the first cello sonata, Opus 5. It can be that, or I think what he's more thinking about is the Pastoral Symphony, right? So I think that is not a mistake, that this is spring. By the way, this title is not his, right? This is not his. There is something really funny that the only thing that we have from Beethoven on this piece in terms of some notes is that it seems that there was a mistake during the first publishing of this. And he said, whoever put septuplets is an A, and I will not finish the other letters. And I thought that is also very telling of his character, that he would write that he's so annoyed with someone making a mistake about his music. Yeah, so F major, I think we're thinking spring, we're thinking this pastoral, beautiful, just super lovely quality. So let's try again. I have one request for the piano part. Can you be more like a string quartet? Do you know what I mean by that? Like what?
Softer.
No, never softer. I am not a person who believes in that the answer is always just less for the piano. The issue with balance, with violin or any other instrument, always has to do with clarity. Sometimes you will hear people like Marta Argerich play recital. She plays massive, right? But she's so careful about texture. So I'll show you really quick. When you start this piece, there is a big difference between this kind of sound that color could be borderline Schubert, borderline Schumann, right? But I think if we're, again, thinking from this classical perspective, you know, Haydn and Mozart. This is a violist or second violinist, right? So you have to play legato, and this is your cellist. So, but not, you hear? It sounds suddenly like Chopin. Yeah. So that's the thing, is that we want to have that clarity, and there are always exceptions. Maybe you're in a really dry space, and it's like, it just sounds awful. The piano's really clunky, and you need some pedal. Maybe in that situation, you do use a little bit of pedal. I think this is a very expensive instrument, and I think you're more than capable at playing really legato with your hand. So let's see if we create that kind of quartet texture below, and then you're just able to sing probably a little more freely because you don't have to deal with the resonance of the piano. Let me try. Have you ever played this very slowly?
Yeah.
Can I hear it?
Sure.
Yeah, please. Good. So so this is a technique that I use all the time when I'm practicing, and I'm sure Ray can attest to this because I've made him do this so many times. That the point of playing slowly is to really accentuate the subtle differences, right? So a subtle difference that I miss is when you begin the distance between the bass of the piano and how high the violin is, right? And then that he decides to alternate the octave immediately in one bar. So, and it just changes. Can we do that slowly and just be aware of that difference between one bar to the next? Yeah, and then make it magical. Yeah, like make it feel that transformation. Good, so I feel like you naturally want to kind of shape to the fourth bar, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, which I think is reasonable. Then can you give me something a bit more inner and dark on the third bar? Same thing. So it's wide, then closer together, something a little bit more burnished and bronzy, and then just like a beautiful little appoggiatura to put the comma. Can we do that? Good. And I'm going to make your life even a little more complicated. There's a way. Ti da 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 ti da ti da. I'm done. Ti da da. Can you reach through and keep that alive? Keep that magic up in the air, because I think so much of what we do as musicians is trying to just get that next 5-second burst of interest into the audience. You know what I'm talking about, right? There is nothing worse as a musician than playing a concert and you can feel the people tuning out. So I find these details, of course you have to have the sweep, and I think you already have that, but what I miss is this kind of precision in how you're listening. Because as we're playing pieces like this, and this is what a great piece, right? We have to be our own guide through this pathway. Right? If you respond to what's happening in the moment, it's too late, right? You're behind. You're reacting to your own playing. But I would love, in a way, your hands are in the present, but your ears are in the future, right? You're always you're almost hearing the music like 3/4 of a second before it happens. This is the reason why conductors conduct ahead of the beat, right? Imagine conductors showing actual beat. It's like orchestra can't follow that. But if they're just slightly ahead, there's always some information that the orchestra players can grab onto and be like, oh, I know what he's about to do or what she's about to do, right? So let's do it one more time, and I want you to have those ears looking into half second into the future, and just show me, guide me through what's special about it. One more time. And let's breathe together. Now big stretch. Ah, legato. He says legato. You play it very beautifully, but can you really sing? Can we try it once together, please? I'm just wondering if there's a more special color. I find you're doing everything I'm asking, so that's great. But I find the touch is maybe something a bit more, I don't know, just more special. Can we try it together? Like, I'm putting in so much energy on every note. You know, like I remember one time, I'll tell a very revealing story about myself. And it actually has to do with Ray. We were playing a concert in upstate New York. And I had mentioned it in passing to my old teacher, Robert McDonald. And I just said, oh, I'm playing up in upstate New York. And he's like, I'll come. I was like, you're gonna come? What? And my old teacher played with like the greatest violinists on earth. Midori, Isaac Stern, you know, Elmar Oliveira. Like weirdly enough, my career has kind of followed in his path. And he came to the concert, and I think we played pretty well. And then afterwards, on the way back, we rode together on the train. And I remember he looked at me and he just said, you know, there's something you need to fix. And when he says that, that's like pretty serious. And even though I was like already a professional, it didn't matter. But he just said, there's a slight passive quality that you can fall into. And I was like, passive? And he's like, yeah, it's a small thing, but he's like, you have to always be doing something. And this material at the opening of this piece is dangerous because it's so simple. It's like so easy to play, right? Like for any person who's playing a concert, Beethoven could not have been kinder to the pianist at this moment. It's like, oh, I can warm up, right? Like we often talk about that, like and sometimes like in the Rachmaninoff concertos, that the opening of the Rachmaninoff Third is like the hardest piece in the world. But what does he give you? Just like octave unison, you know? And it's like, okay, I have a chance to find myself. But I think this piece is so special and so beautiful that you have to kind of be striving to create something, just creating magic at every moment. Okay, can we try it one more time? At tempo, but let's see if we can really, and let's capture, I love the openness, but is there a way for you to create something a bit more emotional? So maybe it's not like all the way open, but it's like you're kind of singing with a lot of sincerity. Different? Okay, good. I'm gonna just pick on you really quick. Do you have staccato on bar 4 and bar 6? Yeah?
Yeah.
Why? Why is there staccato there on that note? This is at the end of the slur. Why would he write that?
To get you excited for the next measure.
Maybe. I think those kinds of markings, we have to think in terms of a vocalist, right? Dee da 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 dee da tee da. That. It's not just tee da dee da tee. He's writing that in for you. So see if you can lift and then make the difference between the 4th and the 6th bar, that they're not the same. That is the other thing in especially classical music, when this is so symmetrical and easy to understand, you need to seek out, this is something that I remember Emmanuel Axe told me, you have to look for the things that make the symmetry not symmetrical, right? Because the symmetry is a given. It's very easy to understand. But those little differences, how he does one thing and then he does it differently, you have to really pronounce that so we understand how the drama unfolds. Okay, can we do it one more time, then we'll go on. Really feel the color together. Good. Different. Gentle. Legato. Dish. Okay, good. I think that's lovely what you're doing now. When there is a crescendo, so recently I played all 5 Beethoven cello sonatas in one concert, which was a very physically exhausting experience. And the one thing that I took away from doing that, because we often play one Beethoven piece on a concert. We rarely play multiples of them. The sense of the use of crescendo is always a slightly explosive and volatile thing in his music. So when you have this crescendo at bar 18, I would love that even though the right hand climbs leading up to it, is there a way that you can set the low point too, right? That we don't go don't lead to the crescendo because then you're already too loud. So I would maybe definitely reach and then maybe over the 2 eighth notes before the crescendo bar, come back so we can create the drama of the crescendo building, all right? Can we do right where the piano takes over? Be very careful about anything that sounds Chopinesque. Yeah? Yeah, right there on bar, what is it? How about 11? I think you can do better. I hear. So the issue is that sometimes when pianistically we want the melody to speak and the digital contact on the piano, we can hear that attack. What we actually need to do is to slow our finger down and have a lot of weight behind it. And then it sounds really legato. Can you try that really slowly? May I also just raise the question, fingerings in piano playing. You start with 5, it's okay, but it's very weak. Right, you're trying to sing with the weakest part of your hand. For me, I would actually do 3, and then switch to 4. So I'm on really strong fingers. I don't want to be taking chances. Switch to 4, and then you can go. Yeah, that's it. Okay, right there. And then can you show me a different attack on the second bar? You don't want to go T da 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 da. Yeah. Now, the eternal question, crescendo to piano, right? Not only do you have to really support your last couple beats, da-da-dum, da-da-dum, we need to hear that last bit of crescendo, and then it's good that we're playing in a space that's this open because you need time, right? Da-da-dum, da-da-dum. Do you hear how long that resonates for? Listen out there. Da-da-dum, da-da-dum. There was the piano. So don't be afraid of having a gap. It's okay. Can we just do it one more time? I'm going to challenge you further. Can you find a different touch for each bar? I find it's a little too similar. Like, can you show me really quick? Just the first note of each bar. Show me the touch. Can you make it more different? That sounds nice. Yeah, I'd buy a ticket to hear that, right? Let's try that, everybody. Good, that's beautiful. Now, I'm going to complicate your life even further. You still need to feel the energy that's next to you. If she wasn't playing, I wouldn't know that that's what's there. But this is a kind of a common rule in chamber music, is that you're always drawing, and I think this goes for anyone who's playing a concerto too. You have to always think about, how does my part function based on the propulsion that's around me? You can't just play it as if you're in like a sound booth separate from everyone with headphones on. No, there's something that's generating energy, and so you can't play it like this kind of nocturne style. There's this that's there. And what I always think is like, I'm just always singing the other person's part. You know? So as you're playing it, sing the eighth notes in your mind so that you feel that. Can we try it? Good. Influence him. Yeah, now, this is the last thing. It's good, very good. Now, can you be in his business all the time? That's what chamber music is about. Right now, you're kind of like, you're almost playing like your own melody, so, which is fine, but can you also sing his melody in your mind, and then you're trying to influence it, right? Like, one of the violinists who, myself, and also I remember Ray probably studied with her too at Curtis, Pamela Frank, who's a violinist, so she's amazing. And she has a great recording of these pieces with her father, Claude Frank. There was a thing about when you would perform with someone like Pamela Frank, is that the moment you would ever like just think like, oh, I want to interact, right? And you'd kind of look over, she'd already be looking at you. And you'd always be kind of like, whoa, that's too soon. But she could feel it. The moment that you wanted to create that contact, she was like already in your business. And so I think right now you guys are like a bit too comfortable with each other. I mean, it's good, you know how to play together. But I'm wondering, can you have this interaction? And that's the conversation that I think makes chamber music exciting for an audience to watch. Yeah, one last time. Influence. Crescendo. Ah! When you see crescendo, you suddenly played louder. So, rule of life. You see crescendo, that's the softest point. You see decrescendo, diminuendo, that's the loudest point. Right? So the moment you see crescendo, drop. Is there a way for this, by the way, that was really beautiful. That suddenly has the magic that I'm looking for, and there's tension in how it unfolds now. It's not just like pianist accompanying or violinist accompanying, there's like actual conversation. And what's beautiful about doing this and kind of focusing on it is that every time you play a concert, it's different, right? It's different hall, different people, and that is really where the language takes off, okay? The bass at bar 20, can that be a bit more kind of suspenseful? Feels a little too comfortable. As if you're playing with a bow on a cello. Can you just show me? Try it. sit down. So, it sounds like. So I'm playing a little less and kind of feeling the impulse of the, but not, this is too amorphous. Can you try that? Yeah, now there's tension in it. That's excellent. Can we try right there, bar 20? Crescendo, crescendo. Ah, isn't that a surprise? You're living too much in the future. So, dum dum, da da. Like, who would expect an E flat? That's out of nowhere. You have to shock yourself, right? Can we do it again? That was really exciting now. Less. Okay, so if we're using my rule about decrescendo, what is your job until you get to that moment? Yep. Is it forte? Fortissimo. All of that's fortissimo. And as a pianist, we see that and we're like, here are a bunch of scales or whatever. Can you imagine this in a string quartet? Two violinists just going D, like it would be much more chaotic and fun. Can you do right there? Now, Beethoven complicates your life, as he always does. He puts slurs. You would think fortissimo should just be loud and not with articulation, or with a lot of articulation, right, to make it as exciting as possible. And he says, no, I want it legato. There's a new slur right there, right? You have to bring that up. Good. And then, can you decrescendo with intensity? We don't, maybe in like Ravel, we like doing the dum, dum, dim, dum. That's kind of French. But with Beethoven's dum, dum, dim, dum, dim. Like you're going to bring us down into the suspenseful low point. Okay? What does he say at the end of your phrase? A dot. A dot. It's back. So it's not dee da 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 da, dee da dee da da. It's a question mark, right? The other thing with Beethoven or any classical music is that I find it is so important to relate everything to opera. Because that's like, today, what do we think about what common music is? Bruno Mars, Taylor Swift, Lady Gaga, whatever, right? So we relate everything through that. In that time, it would have been all opera. So to just go ti da 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 da, would an opera singer do that? Ta da ti da da. No, they'd be like ti la da da da, ti da di da da. There would be some sort of dramatic action to the question. I think allow yourself the freedom to do that kind of thing. Okay, E flat again. Different? Okay, now I'm gonna just look at the score. I hear, if I'm taking dictation in the piano part, I hear ta wa wa. What does he mark? Yeah, that's what he wrote, right? Quarter notes with staccato and rests. And I always say to all my students, at that time, with Beethoven, Mozart, ink and paper is expensive. It would have been much easier to write that as half notes. But he went to the trouble of saying quarter note, dot, staccato, rest. Every time. That's a very specific thing. So let's see if I think it'll be easier for you to play actually. And when you come in, dim, dum, dim, you sound, feels like slow music. dim dum dum dum. Be somehow in the context of the dum dum dim dum ti, right? Not just okay, same spot. So we have to crescendo in one bar to forte. Could it be quite a bit more shocking? You know, when you do this, I think it could be a little more magical. So I'm using kind of a fast attack, and I'm lifting out of the key quickly. Right? It's not, but right? Now here he writes no slur. It's different. But it's different sounds. You know, these details, you know, on one hand they're a curse because you feel like you're just, God, there's so much there, right? But on the other hand, they're the greatest gift. Imagine if we had this music written the way Mozart writes his music. So in Mozart, he writes nothing. He says forte, piano. He'll put like a slur sometimes. And the rest of it is just you being a great musician. And that's why I think in some ways Mozart is like the ultimate test of artistry. But Beethoven, it's like every note to him has a function. And so in a way, what I would suggest to you is like, take the time away from your instruments and stare at the score, like study the score like a conductor and just ask yourself, why? Why slur here? Why not slur there? Why staccato here? Why is it long there? Like you have to ask yourself these questions, and then suddenly everything you're doing has an answer, you know? And that's when I think the audience starts to come into contact with Beethoven himself, right? It's almost like, you know, when people do seances and they're like, okay, we're gonna light a candle and we're gonna hope that the spirit of so-and-so comes to this room in the darkness. It's like that, right? It's like if we just do everything that's on this page and we make sense of it and we identify the emotions and we understand why he would write all these things, maybe the spirit of Beethoven will come into this room. And sometimes you get lucky, and that's usually when like audiences come away and they're like freaked out. They're like, that's the most amazing music ever. And then you're like, I played a pretty good concert. And you're like, I did pretty well. No, Beethoven did well. It's just that you did what he asked. Okay, let's do this one last time, and then we have to stop. Good. With tension. Crescendo! So, last detail I will point out. Ta da 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 da. Shouldn't there be a sforzando in the last one? Why not? Why would he do that? I don't have the answer, but I see it. He writes this, da 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 da, then no sforzando, di da di da di da da. I think it's because he wants the propulsion into the next bar. He doesn't want a rhythmic disturbance right there. Let's do it one last time. It's worth doing. Then we'll stop. With energy. Feel the energy. Fortissimo. Good, bravo. I think you're starting to cook because you're using his language. So count on it. Read it like it's the Bible. And the answers are there. You just have to ask the questions to understand what you're saying. Okay? Bravo.
Thank you.
multiple students? Thank you for playing this. Can you tell me about this composer?
Yes, Herman Beeftank is a kind of well-known composer in the flute world. He composes a lot of like modern flute pieces, and so this is kind of like more on the modern side.
Cool.
Composition. Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's like, first, I rarely get to coach woodwind music, but it's really such a lovely, different texture than what we do in strings and piano stuff. So, my questions about this mostly have to do with pacing, and then how you handle the orchestration of it, and in particular, textures. Because on one hand, a choir of flutes is like very beautiful, but it's also a huge disadvantage because you all have the exact same sound, right? And I think there's a danger in this music that the listener can get kind of lulled into a place where they don't hear the differentiation between things. And I think there are moments where you do want to have that absolute crystalline, unifying color, but there are also moments where I think the composer's writing certain textures and we can maybe exaggerate the textural differences so that the audience gets like a contrast to enjoy. So can we maybe just start again? Good. So I'm going to raise some possibilities. The density of the sound, if there's a way to have maybe a slightly more focused quality at the opening. Right now it feels kind of somewhere in the airier side of things. Maybe you could support your sound a little more noticeably. So it's like the density is like I can hear the friction between the four instruments. And then the other thing, just as an experimentation, I'm sure you've already discussed this, but what would happen if there was like really no vibrato? I know it says espressivo, I know, but espressivo can happen in many different ways. And I think there's something expressive of the chords themselves. And in a way, I'm just curious to know what would happen if you really worry about like kind of the motion. That's really what's poetic about it, rather than just the sound being vibrated. Can we try that, just as an experiment? Good. And then the last thing is there a way to cue so it's a bit more atmospheric? Like, I think it feels, the quality of the cueing right now is very like, D, and I'm just wondering if there's something more T, like some magic before you start generating sound. So really breathe together. Good. And let's strive, let's put all of our effort into just being perfectly together on that first note. Good. One last thing. I always find it helpful in a situation like that, like this actually, that not only one person has the responsibility of leading the group, that everyone leads to each other, to the center. When there's only one person leading, there's actually, the person who's leading is at a disadvantage because they have control, like you have control by being the first flute, but on the other hand, you're not getting any information back from anyone else. So you're kind of driving blind, and you don't know if anyone's with you. So it's really important. Like you'll see this constantly in orchestras. The conductor will give. Good. Bravo. That's a different thing now. Did you guys hear that difference? It was suddenly really unified and very beautiful. The second bar. Same business, right? So, and even could you put effort into the way you shape your sound so that as you're moving from the first note to the second note, you're almost like phrasing towards everyone else so everyone else can hear you shaping, right? And then what is your battle plan in terms of the phrasing of the third chord? Are you thinking, because you need to breathe, right? You're about to collapse if not. You're thinking kind of diminuendo and just kind of back off? Okay, that works for me. Could we try something where maybe the first note isn't so kind of led in this way? That maybe it's just a bit more like there. Like the light just turns on, not this kind of fading. The fading in business can work, but I fear that for so early in the piece, we kind of want like that unity to be the game, right? And then, is there something in the third bar that maybe you can find something a little breathier, just to change the texture a little bit? Because if you're going to back off anyway, let's back off in a very interesting way, okay? Okay, and then we need to decide what we're going to do on the third bar, or the fourth, what was the third set of chords, right? Is your idea to play the same or to play differently? Same? What if we tried less? So, in other words, maybe we start with a little more presence, because it's not pianissimo, right? It's piano. So maybe you kind of want to fill the hall with your sound, not feel like it's just up here. And then when you repeat the second gesture, maybe you could bring everyone into a more intimate space. I'm just kind of like improving here, but I think just to make things a little more exciting for the audience.
Do you want us to start from the top into it, or
Start from the beginning and a little bit more present. Everyone, we lost the cueing. Like some of you were sort of cueing. I want everyone to take ownership over the first note. And then I love the breathy thing, I think was very beautiful and poetic. And then when you start the second part of the phrase, then you could maybe have that more intimate feeling. Good. That's very lovely. I would buy tickets to hear this piece. When you have the C sharp, da-dee, da-da, can you lean into the dissonance more noticeably? Can we do the second half? So I guess that's bar 5. So where it's kind of pianissimo. Even a little more. It almost blends too easily. Okay. I would love to feel that kind of, the friction of that note, yeah. Good, beautiful, I think you're getting a really nice sound. Just there at bar 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, especially the first 2 flutes, you have a kind of a, that second, right? I would be careful about using vibrato at that moment, because the vibrato almost takes away from the, that little bit of like stickiness between the 2 parts. So I would maybe lean into a really flat tone kind of quality. One more time. And then you have the 8th notes, right? Mm-hmm. Could they be even more hushed? So that it's not just like, here are the 8th notes, but I think they could just kind of emerge out of this, because as I'm listening to this, I don't know, I could imagine any great film composer writing this way, especially with some beautiful vista and it's like icy or something like that. So I think we want to find a way to evoke that kind of world, right? Can we try again from the 5th bar, was it? Please. Okay, I like that. I think that's very, very effective. When the second, I guess you join in for the 8th notes, I would try to be as hushed as possible. Because, you know, at the end of the day in this moment, I feel like this da-dee-da-dee-da, it's not that interesting. I mean, it's not, no, I'm not trying to say anything bad about the composer, but it's just, it's just a murmuring kind of propulsion, right? But I think if it's too real, if it's too da-dee-da-dee, something far more kind of like distant, I think it'll create more atmosphere in the room. Can we just do maybe, how about 15? Yeah, so right now, that dynamic will sound exactly the same as them. So you have to be almost 2 dynamic levels above. And I think it's okay for it to sound almost like, I don't know, like droplets, you know, on the water, you know, like ding, dong, like bell-like. So don't be afraid about like that you're gonna interrupt. I think that's the point, right? Yeah, one more time. And again, let's not stop the leading of the motion, you know, because I think the danger in a piece like this is that if all 4 of you are kind of just allowing the non-direction to happen, the music starts sounding maybe a little lacking in focus and direction. So just keep leading as if you're like, all of your leading is generating a conductor in the center, okay? Even more. Can you just play by yourself once, just here? Okay, I would say that's like piano. How about mezzo piano? Good. No, mezzo forte. And a little more pointed in the articulation. Yeah, so it's a little t. Yeah, because that'll really give us a contrast between the texture. Can we start maybe just at 17? Good. Better. And then you have to be mindful about the way you handle the diminuendo, because I think we don't want to lose you completely. So keep that articulation as really angular as possible, while the other 3 are playing very linear, smooth, right? And then I see in this score there's a forte on the double bar. Sounds piano. I would love for you to just interrupt, like it's like a trumpet call or something. Don't be worried that we're gonna think it's rude or anything. I think it'll sound fine. One more time, 17. More. Yeah, like a lot. It's not gonna be too much. Like really interrupt. Can you do just your part really quick? Yeah, that to me, again, if I'm rating it, I would say that's like a mezzo piano, mezzo forte. And give me as much as you can on your first note, because the first note is what's going to really matter, because I'll hear the F sharp, but that C sharp is so low and close to the texture that you're going to have to punch it out a little harder. See if you really give yourself, it's also maybe how you handle the dum, 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 da, like a really quick breath. Okay, good. Let's try, how about 2 bars before double bar? So that's 19. All right, just for experiment, can you do like your loudest sound there once, just to hear? I'll tell you if it's too much. Yeah, okay, let's try it together.
So that is 2 bars before still?
Yeah. Yeah, I still, and this is the other issue. When we're dealing with chamber music, we often have to worry about the game of numbers. How many people are we compensating for, right? So you have 3 players who can generate quite a lot of texture, and it's one of you. So you have to like almost think forte times 3 to undo the balance, issues. Like I think about that a lot sometimes in chamber music, like with strings and piano. Suddenly you'll have a cellist, violinist, pianist playing, cellist drops out. Violinist has to play a bit more as soon as the cellist is gone, because the audience has become accustomed to 3 sounds. So the same thing kind of here. It's like we're getting used to this. You have to really be so much more powerful. One last time. 19. Good. I'm curious about one thing, which is you are the bass of the group, right? And I know the composer just wrote separate half notes, but I wonder what would happen if you were to be a bit more linear and less pulsed. So that there's something like you're almost creating the traction of where we're heading, and we don't just get each bar kind of separating out. I think that might help, and then the 2 of you could also keep that linear, and then the first flute will be able to soar above. Okay? How about just right there on the double bar? Good. And then if you need to breathe, it's okay. Less. Interrupt. Good. That's very effective. I'm enjoying this. Here, when you get to this next double bar, 41, this is the other issue of this piece, which is that the rhythmic, let's say, material tends to be all similar. So let's say if we have a section that's all straight eighth notes and we're kind of thinking, dee-da-da-da-da, the moment this composer gives you an opportunity to change that, you got to really take it. So bar 41. It doesn't have to be ba-dee-da-da. You could change it into a gesture like da-dee-da-da, ba-dee-da-da. I would, just to have some variety, can we try right there on bar 41? Maybe, do you want the pickup? Pick up into 41, then let's gesture that stuff. Then more stable. Same again. Good. And I think this is this the first writ of the movement?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So there's a danger that we won't even hear it. Because it could sound like you're just being good musicians kind of rounding off the section. So I would take real control over those four quarters and ti ya ti yam ba. I thought that was really lovely. The little gestures. It has a bit more organic life to it.
Yeah.
Can we do you want to try it one more time just to get even better at it? Yep. And I have another question here. At bar 50, I think because all of the eighth note motion has been suspended, I think there's a possibility that you could be just totally free. Yeah, like we don't have to feel the pulse for a second. You can just be, soaring above the mountain or whatever you want to imagine. Ti-yo, ti-yo. And then you don't have to come in exactly on time, just ti-yo, like a little fantasy like. Can we just start right there, that a tempo? Let's get a real pianissimo from the lower three, please. A tempo? Yeah?
So 50.
I just have one last question. At this moment, theoretically, the dynamic is kind of pianissimo, right? Mm-hmm. Could we have something even more glassy and sparkly? Feels a little. I can almost hear too much the humanness of it. It's like T, but T, just almost very lean, the texture, right on 62. Yeah, so last thing, just that writ, again, it will sound like you're just being a good musician, but you have to really pronounce it like, I am taking time here, okay? Last, but can we just do where let's see, 63, 4, 5, 6, 7, 68? Could that be even airier and like almost not like you can't touch it anymore? Just floating. One last time. Bravo. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. Really. Thank you. Bravo. Sounds really good. May I ask how old each of you are? How old are you?
12 years old.
You're 12. How old are you?
I'm also 12 years old.
How old are you? 13 years old. Not bad, gentlemen. Not bad. I have an interesting story for you that has to do with your ages. So some of you know the name József Joachim. He's a Hungarian violinist who was very close friends with Brahms. The Brahms Violin Concerto was basically written with the help of József Joachim, and he was arguably probably one of the greatest violinists of that time. So the story goes that when Joachim, and he tells this story in one of his memoirs, that he was 12 years old, and he went to London to play this piece, this trio, with Mendelssohn, right? And can you imagine, 12 years old, and the composer of this piece wants to play with you, right? Here's the problem. They got to the concert, Mendelssohn forgot his music. But the good thing was that Mendelssohn was a genius. So he was like, oh, it's fine. I'll just play it from memory. But at that time, it was considered rude and disrespectful to play from memory. It's kind of the opposite of today, right? But the thinking at that time was, how could you possibly do everything that the composer wanted? How dare you play from memory and come up with your own stuff? You should have the music in front of you. And the person we have to thank for, well, either thank or maybe not thank for the whole business of memory is really Clara Schumann. She was one of the first people who started to really play concerts from memory. Anyway, so Mendelssohn did not want to upset the concertgoers. So he put a random piece of music on the piano and played the entire piece. And he told the page turner, he said, make sure you just turn every couple of minutes. And I'm just thinking, can you imagine, you know how hard this piece is. Can you imagine staring at some other piece and playing all of that from memory? I mean, I just can't imagine the genius level of someone like Mendelssohn that he could do something like that. And a kind of a small, quick related anecdote to a similar brain. There's a great conductor who now passed away, Lorin Maazel, who used to be the music director of the New York Philharmonic. He also had one of these brains. And at some point, he was conducting the Met Opera. And you know, one of the things about Maazel was that he had this prodigious photographic memory. And he would rehearse from memory. Can you imagine rehearsing a 3-hour opera from memory and knowing the rehearsal letters and numbers? So he would have nothing in front of him, just, oh, and D, 2 bars before D, and then he would start conducting. And so people just got used to it. And at some point, the principal cellist of the orchestra noticed on one particular day that they were working on the opera and there was a piece of music there. And Lorin Maazel was turning the pages randomly. And so at the break, the principal cellist went up to Maazel and he said, Maestro, I see you have music with you today. Is there something wrong or something that you're specifically wanting to, check on? And he said, oh no, I just have to conduct Idomeneo next week and I'm reviewing my score. He's reviewing his score while conducting a totally different opera. Talk about being efficient with your time. Anyway, the first thing that I want to do is this. Yeah. You should always play with a full stick. For 2 reasons. One is that you do not play too loud. And number 2 is that for the rest of your life, if you choose to be a professional musician, this is the scenario you're going to encounter. So I think better to get used to it now, right? The thing about playing with full stick versus half stick is that, in my opinion, when you play half stick, people think it's less sound, but it's actually just less clear sound. And I think what ends up happening to pianists is that when it's on half stick, you actually end up playing louder because you can't hear yourself. And I think that actually just goes right up against what we're trying to do. Most of the time, the big problem with playing full stick is actually this. This is a giant piece of wood in front of all of the sound that's being produced. So it's almost like having a mute. So that's the one thing, if at some point maybe you switch to an iPad or something like that, you can have a little stand, and then you can actually hear directly into the piano, and that will change your concept of sound. But even then, I don't think you're going to play too loud. The biggest issue with this piece, and believe it or not, I once played a piano that Mendelssohn played on. And it was an instrument that belonged in this home of some very wealthy benefactor. And so Mendelssohn and Robert Schumann and Clara Schumann, they would all come and play concerts there. That instrument is like, goes to here. And it's like this wide. It's so tiny, it's wood. And I remember I sat down to play on it, I was like, I think I'm gonna break this piano. And that's what he was dealing with a lot of the time. The piano of even Liszt did not exist yet. So he was thinking of something a bit airier and more transparent, and the sustain would not have been as noticeable. So one of the things that you can do back there is you can actually flutter pedal quite a lot. If you ever go to watch Marta Argerich play concerts live, you will notice her foot is always doing this, because she wants the resonance of the sound, but not the murkiness. She wants clarity. So that's something that you can mess around with. I think overall, you guys are being very, very diligent about everything. I'm just wondering about two things. I'm wondering about, can we create a sense of instability, right? He says, molto allegro agitato. And he puts some metronome mark that's just insane. It's too fast. And there's something just nervous about this piece, right? It's nervous, it's unstable, it's dark, it's brooding. Can we try again? And then for strings, so I gave him a full stick, right? So you have to compensate for that now. We're in a big hall. I was in a piano trio for very many years, and we competed together, and we often got feedback when we would compete. And I remember at our first competition, which we did okay, we got like second prize or something. And this juror, who was a cellist, came up to us and he says, balance is bad. We were like, oh, what should we do? And he was just like, play at the bridge. And then he just like walked away. And my poor cellist had to figure that out for like the rest of our time together. And it's a thing that, you know, the business of contact point on your instruments kind of decides about how focused your sound is, right? And sometimes I think string players get nervous about playing closer to the bridge because they worry that it's going to scratch, right? It's going to get a little ugly. If this wave of sound is behind you, this is going to eat up a lot of that. And then beyond that, that scratchiness will probably travel to about here. And the rest of it that gets out to the audience will actually be very clear and focused. So I want to start again, and I want to see what happens if we like just start playing a little closer to the bridge, a little more focused, and we try to seek out a bit more instability. At the opening of this piece, I think the danger, and I hear this piece often, it can sound slow, right? Da-dee, da-da-dee, da-da-da. Can you play your part? Good. Now, you have to be, may I sit down for a second? You have to be ultra subtle in your shaping all the time. So you have to use very little pedal. He says pedal, but like, again, on that tiny wooden piano, on this you can't. You hear? There's a difference between that or then your life is very difficult, right? Can you try that? Just by yourself? Good. Now, this is a kind of a technical thing. As pianists, we often think this way. If you do this, kind of using your arm to push the sound forward rather than drop to the bottom of the key, you're probably going to get a little bit more control and it can be even softer. Can you do it really slowly for me once? And you're kind of like engaging this way, forward. Yeah, try now a little bit at tempo. Good. Now, the last thing is the shapes. The shapes are good. I appreciate the shapes. But we want the shapes to be very kind of like they're being stifled. You can't do too much. Let the cellist have their glory. Don't worry, you're going to blow them up in a little while. Can we start at the beginning? With cello. Good. Now, here's the complicated thing, is that you have a melody that is kind of slow in nature, right? But it is being infected by this instability back here. So you have both things to do. This is like why singers go through coaching a lot, because they have to figure out how are they going to sing beautifully, but also sing in context to what's happening around them, right? And so there's da, 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 da. You have to feel that as if you have that rhythm inside of you while you're playing, and then inflect so that there's some connection between the two of you. You're in some very subtle tornado in piano. Can we try? Crescendo, more. Good, beautiful. That's nice. I think that's very beautiful. And the last thing that I might suggest is just the sound itself, like the vibrato, the type of vibrato you use, could be a little more searching, unstable. Feels like comfortable. Maybe a little faster vibrato. Keep us unsettled. Now, when you come in, you have a totally different role, because cello got to play this beautifully, like, you know, with Mendelssohn, he writes such elegant melodies. They're so perfectly thought out. But the difference with like Mendelssohn and other composers is that there's something very explosive. When he decides to go, it's like, it just goes crazy. So you have to go, not just like play your melody, but you have to go into like concerto mentality, right? You're leading, you're the concertmaster of the orchestra, or you're like the concerto soloist in front of the orchestra. You have to take over and just push the group into a different territory of sound. Can we do that one last time from where you begin? Bass. Push them. Good. So, may I sit down for 1 second? So this is, again, problematic in chamber music. We get to this final forte, right? I hear the difference in dynamic is not enough. You have to go really extreme. So like we need to have those really extreme explosive peaks. And then again, things are suppressed. Can we do maybe where the violin enters? Da dee da da da. Support. Shh, nothing. Crescendo, bigger. Shh, nothing. Good. May I sit down? When you do these kind of peaks again, I need something that cries out. It's so sad. What's his problem? Right? I mean, he's having a really bad day. So, and then suddenly there's all this nervous energy. Can we do it right there? Wherever you want it. Yeah, I want you to sing out all of it. And then we'll go on. Okay, how about, can you start where this begins? right here when you're holding the low D. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, let's get this to be light. You know, I think Mendelssohn was possibly one of the greatest scherzo composers. They're just the most fabulous. They're always intricate. And, you know, like, I remember when I was a student, I heard Bernard Haitink, who's an amazing conductor. And he came to Juilliard when I was a student, and he conducted the student orchestra, and he conducted the Hebrides Overture by Mendelssohn. And I will never forget the sound. When that started, it felt like there were 15 different parts, like just like in orbit of each other. And I could hear each one so perfectly. And I'd heard from some of my friends that Haitink had been so particular during rehearsal that he was like, no, this has to be like this has to be like that. And once he got it right, it was like, you know, just a really life-changing experience. So when you guys get to these, really get the kind of texture of the sound to be as vivid as you can, right? So not too loud, and just keep it like a bit more like little sparks, okay? Can we do where the strings come in? I guess that's B or whatever, 48, middle of 48. It's a 48, is that what you have?
Yeah.
Deem da 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 dum. So 1, 2, 3, 1. Less pedal, less pedal. Crescendo, more, most. Hey, I have a question. Is there a dot on that upbeat? Dot, Do you have staccato? No? Okay, it sounds like staccato. So da-dee, like grab that upbeat note. That's what we need, just right there. Da-dee, fortissimo. Yeah, so, may I sit down one more time? So pianistically speaking, this stuff is dangerous, right? It's a lot of notes. If you want to obliterate the strings, you have too much power, right? You don't need, this is too much. Like really just clear. You have great hands, so just, almost like just put your foot to the side.
So, no pedal.
As little pedal as humanly possible.
Okay.
You know, there's a great chamber music pianist, Menachem Pressler, who is the pianist of the Beaux-Arts Trio, greatest piano trio of the 20th century. I was very lucky when I was a student because he would come to our school every year and he would perform. And I was always amazed by his textures on the piano. And I remember one time I got to see him play a Beethoven violin sonata, and I was watching, and I remember I was like, wow, his legato is so crazy. And then I started to notice his foot was never on the pedal. It was all finger legato, and I think he touched the pedal like 5 to 6 times during an entire Beethoven violin sonata. And one time he touched the soft pedal. It's amazing to listen to sound when it's that purposeful. So I think in here, you really don't need pedal at all. And in terms of balance, that's the thing that's going to allow the balance to work out. Because the moment you put the pedal, suddenly there's like a 30% bonus in terms of the balance issue. So we want to remove that all the time, and the less pedal you use, the better. Can we do again, fortissimo? Da-dee. Less, more, pedal, pedal, then no pedal. Hand it off. hold on, Mr. Pianist. Can you let me? So you played. That's a miracle. That F sharp, right? That doesn't belong in this key at all. So everything's okay. That F sharp is the reason. So when you get there, you can make some magic happen right there. Can we go from dee da dee da dee da dee da when you have the eighth notes? Dee da dee da dee da dee da. Different. Bravo. Bridge, bridge, bridge. At the bridge. Closer to the bridge. Believe it or not. Now, playing at the bridge is risky business, okay? The closer you are to the bridge, the more tension there is in the string, right? So you have to be careful that you use the kind of gentlest touch. No tension is allowed. You have to just use all natural weight and keep everything just buttery smooth so that you can get things to... Can you just do your tune once? Now, what if I asked you to play an inch closer to the bridge? Now, when you're playing that close, can you just use the natural friction against the string? It feels like you're almost pushing the sound in. Don't do that. Do the opposite. Just draw the sound out of the string and use a little more bow so that it's free. Good. And then the last thing is, when we use that sound profile, the danger is that you're so focused that the moment your bow slips away, we hear it immediately. Your sound suddenly becomes like you're talking like this. So you need to actually be mindful that you're really in the same place consistently. Can you try one last time? Just you? Hey, that's a pretty nice sound. Can we get a little more kind of presence of the vibrato so that it just resonates openly? That's a different sound. Yeah, right? Every time you play chamber music with a piano, that is part of your problem, doing that. Because then the pianist has a chance. They don't have to play so pale. They can actually play with some focus, some intensity, and everyone will hear you and everyone will hear the pianist. Can we do right where you change to the F sharp, and then we'll have you come in with your brand new sound? There are moments in chamber music where we have to pretend we don't know what's supposed to happen. So you get to play the tune, right? Like first you play, and then piano plays. Now, may I sit down really quick? There's a little bit of kind of notiness in the way you play. I'm trying to use slow weight, and I'm letting my arm create the sound rather than my fingers. Can you just try that really quick? Yeah, and watch, you get, I want, yes, that's like a nice melodic legato. Okay, but the cool thing is you play the tune, and then suddenly the violin joins in. You guys play together. You play as if you're meeting at the elevator going into work, right? It's like, how you doing, John? Very good, Jack. I'm going to work. No, you have to be like, oh, we play together. Hey, buddy, you know? It would be nice to have that discovery, right? I think that's the problem, especially with a piece like this that everybody knows way too well, right? Every student group plays. I actually didn't play this piece until I was like a graduate student for the first time. And I remember I was like, this piece is so hard. What are you young people playing this for? For some reason, we keep assigning really hard trios to younger players. But I think this moment of discovery has to always be vivid, right? So you almost have to look over, and you have to look over and be like, and that was the thing. It's funny. I remember my teacher, Mr. Lowenthal at Juilliard, who's also an amazing pianist, but we were speaking about chamber music, and the topic of Menachem Pressler came up. And Mr. Lowenthal said, oh, it's all just a scam the way he looks over at people. And I thought that was a very funny thing, because Pressler's thing would be that you'd watch him play and he'd always be doing this, like, let's play together, let's play together. And then you'd hear later that the people in the rehearsal would be kind of beaten up and destroyed by him, because he'd always say, you play with me, you play with me. And so these people who thought they were soloists had to accompany the piano. But at the end of the day, you know, it's like, I don't think it's necessarily important that you guys like stare at each other when you play this melody, but just the sense of like, hey, we're together. And just to notice each other, and just to enjoy that, because I think that's what the audience takes from a piece like this. Can we do one last time? That sound is really beautiful. I would bring that up with your teacher, and just to explore how to use that tool, because at the end of the day, for both of you, this business of contact point in this scenario in chamber music, that is part of your toolkit, right? It's a palette that you have, and you need to know why you're playing closer to the bridge or why you're playing closer to the fingerboard, but you don't want it to be just totally random. You know, you want it to be purposeful, okay? Last time. And let's stay in tempo. Closer to the bridge, closer to the bridge. Legato. With your friend. Bigger together. Delicate. Ah, what's the dynamic? Pianissimo. You have to kind of jolt us out of this. Like, we were thinking everything was so perfect, right? Walking in the meadow, everything's fine. And suddenly there's like, tum, tum, ta, tim, ba, dum, bum. What does this mean? Right? Can we just do right there the little 4 bars that you have in between? So piano, piano, piano. Nothing. Yeah, so it's like a huge question mark. What does this moment mean? Okay, so let's do that again, and then you guys will come in on the pianissimo. Wait, listen. Broken, passionate. Take your time. The demon is back. Good. For something like this is the other thing that you have to be mindful about in a piece like this. You will have slow notes, right? This is kind of the nature of so much of this music. Same thing like when you play like Rachmaninoff cello sonata. It's like 500 notes, 2 notes, right? There's there's an imbalance. You two have to feel that rhythm. You cannot go ti ya da da di di da da. You must feel that current underneath you and reflected in your sound. Can we just do the agitato? Lead the group. You can use pedal here. Yeah, so that's the other thing, is that you have to know when you're alone, suddenly these rules about pedaling are gone. So you have a solo, pedal, right? They play, no pedal. And that's you're gonna have to go through the piece and analyze, where can I use that more soloistic sound? Where do I have to be a bit more transparent and very just clear, okay? Those are the things I would work towards. But I think you guys are off to an excellent start. So thank you for playing for us. Thank you. So I think theoretically we're supposed to be done, but maybe we can take like 1 or 2 questions. If anyone has one, I'd be happy to answer them. Anybody with a question? No question?
If you're first putting together a chamber quartet, and there's people that are inexperienced with that, how long would you say use a metronome to help people learn how to put it together? Would you use a metronome in rehearsal?
There are times nowadays where I do use a metronome, even professionally, you know, because I think I don't think it should be a crutch, but I do think that, like, I can't remember, there was a recent moment where Ray and I were playing something and we were like, something feels a little suspicious, like we're not aligning. One of us is feeling rhythm in a different way, and we just put the metronome on just to hear the truth, you know? And I think to do that, and then in combination with using, like, recording yourself, that's the other thing. When you hear yourself back, that doesn't lie either. And you can tell, like, oh, I'm rushing, I'm not rushing. So I think there's nothing wrong with using it at the beginning if you feel like you're unstable. I think absolutely to just build that up. And, you know, in particular, we tend to use it more in contemporary pieces because, like, you're just so busy doing other things that you need some sense of understanding of what the pulse is. So I think the metronome can be very helpful in work. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
What would you recommend for someone just starting chamber music?
For someone just, yeah. Can you ask the question one more time?
What would you recommend for like someone to practice if they just start chamber music?
In terms of like strategy or?
Like just like kind of staying together and kind of having the same idea throughout the piece.
Mm-hmm. I mean, chamber music is a complicated situation because everyone in the group tends to be taxed in different ways at different times. And I find that the greatest hindrance to making progress in chamber music is if people are unprepared. Because then when you're rehearsing together, you're kind of wasting each other's time. You know, and I think the other danger is that it is very likely that you will begin to adjust for someone's kind of discomfort with a certain phrase or something. And then 2-3 rehearsals later, they'll practice it and suddenly it's fine. And you've gotten used to this different timing. So I think that's the most helpful thing is that everyone really practices like ready to perform. You know, like I run a music festival outside of Seattle and we have a program, it's our fellowship program, and we invite musicians to be part of it who are basically on the verge of starting their career. So like the associate concertmaster of the Met Opera is one of our alums. And what I say to them when they come, and I think it's a different thing. If you're a student, there's definitely different expectations. But for myself, like in that situation, I tell everyone who comes as a fellow to my program, I say, you have to basically be ready to perform on the first day of rehearsal. Because in our circumstance, we usually only have 3 days to rehearse a piece. And that's like 4 movements of a piece, or 3 movements, whatever it is. And the last thing you need is someone to show up and either have doubts about their notes or have, you know, insecurity about how they're playing their part, because what you're trying to do is get as close to the performance point as possible. So that's my thing, is that I think it's just really being prepared for that first rehearsal, knowing your score really well, doing the studying, listening to a recording just to make sure all your notes kind of make sense and the rhythms kind of make sense. And just to know what is connected to who, you know, to understand, okay, when I come in here, the second violinist is finishing this gesture or whatever, so that you understand how it's all built. And then when you come to the rehearsal, it's a far more efficient process. But you don't want to be sitting there just kind of constantly making up for everyone's mistakes, and then you're slowing yourself down, you're wasting time. So that's what I would try to focus on. Yes?
I just want to comment that to play a chamber group like this, the strings can be intermediate, but the piano has to be an advanced player.
Oh, there's a mic for you. Yeah.
I was just saying that the players you know, if the players are intermediate level, the pianist has to be expert level. And it's very hard to put together an ensemble if you are an intermediate player, because pianists won't play with you.
Yeah, that's that's interesting you say that. You know, so at my school, every semester we have to put together groups, and we have people from differing levels of experience, and repertoire I think is really critical in that, because maybe you have a pianist who may not feel comfortable playing something like this, but maybe there's another piece like a Mozart trio or a Haydn trio where they can totally feel comfortable, and there's still plenty to do for the strings. I know, we all want to play what we want to play, but I think that is the issue, is that finding some compromise in terms of the repertoire so that both groups can feel at ease about what they're doing. And I think that just takes time to find something, so yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay. Oh yeah, back there. You can grab the mic.
Would you have any tips on how to say, learn a lot of notes before like a first rehearsal?
Do I have tips for learning lots of notes?
Yeah.
Practice? Yeah. You know, I once asked a kind of similar question to the British concert pianist Stephen Hough, or Sir Stephen Hough, I should say. And I just said to him, how do you manage all this repertoire? Because he plays like a different concerto every week, and it's hard. And he does recitals, and he does chamber music. And he told me a story about a phone call he received soon after he won the Naumburg competition. And it was the Chicago Symphony. They called him and they said, "We know you play the Bartók First Concerto. Can you play it at the rehearsal in 2 days?" Bartók First Concerto will almost make your hands fall off. And he said to the guy who called him, he said, "Please give me 1 hour and I will call you back." And he pulled out his music and he looked at it, and after he looked at the music, he was like, "Fine, I will accept this engagement." And he went. He was on a plane the next day. He said the only reason he was able to accept that engagement was because he puts a fingering over every note that he plays, which is nuts for a pianist. Pianists don't do that. I mean, one of my mentors, Seymour Lipkin, I remember watching him play Rachmaninoff Cello Sonata or Beethoven Cello Sonata. There's not one marking in the entire score, anywhere. It was all memorized. But Stephen Hough, he believes that, especially for concerto playing, that you have to be absolutely certain about every fingering so that there's no question about what's going to happen. And then that's what made it possible for him to do that. I think that's the thing, is fingerings. Now, I might not go to that extreme, but I do think being very, again, purposeful about your fingerings and thinking about them in advance and just knowing, like, for sure this is the way I get through this passage, and I need a 4 here and I need a 3 there, and I need to think about how this works. I'm constantly writing that stuff in my scores. And thankfully, you know, I'm able to like juggle a lot of repertoire because of that. So that's what I would say, just slow practice, putting in fingerings so you're sure. And then you also have to do a bit of trial and error with fingerings, because sometimes what you do slowly does not work fast. And so sometimes you have to kind of preview and go fast and figure out if the fingering works, and then you have to practice it and rehearse it and choreograph it at a slower tempo. So that's what I would suggest for you to do. Yeah.
Hi. What are the most important values, or like in chamber music, like what makes a good chamber group?
What makes a good chamber group? Well, patience, that's the big one. It's tricky because when we play chamber music, it depends. I have to put this in 2 different arenas, because on one hand, when we do chamber music, we do, let's say, professional pickup groups, right? You come together with 2, like I'm gonna do this literally in about a week. I'm gonna fly up to Portland, I'm gonna play with, 3 people that I don't play with that often. We're gonna have 1 day to rehearse 2 full pieces, and then I got to play, right? In that situation, what I find is talking less is better, and just playing a lot solves a lot of issues. And then when you do talk, you try to always comment in a very broad way about something that will help everyone rather than pointing out someone's issue. And even then, like, there's certain strategies, like if someone's rushing, and I could say like, hey, I think you're rushing, I don't say that. I just say, hey, I think something's unsteady at this one part. Can we play it slowly together once? And then suddenly everyone pays attention, and then it fixes the problem. But that's one type of rehearsing where you're maybe a little not sure about what people think, how they would react. Then there's the other side, which is really serious groups. They know each other like family. They grow to hate each other like family sometimes, or love each other like family. And like with my trio, I remember we could spend, like the cellist and myself, like I remember one time my violinist had to go away to go do something for like 2 days before a concert. And so he left, and it was just the 2 of us. And we were playing this Brahms trio, and there's this 12-bar long cello melody with piano. And I remember we spent 2.5 hours on those 12 bars. Yeah, in the slow movement of the B major trio. Yeah, we spent 2.5 hours on that. But the thing is that he trusted me and I trusted him completely. And we knew that any comment that we would say, no matter how invasive, was for the betterment of the group. So I would just say, can you think about this? Can you think about that? And he'd say, can you feel this? Can you feel? And we would just kind of keep detailing it until there was just nothing left to take risks on. And I think that's the thing, is to find a group where there's that trust, that you can get that deep in the weeds. And sometimes what actually happens is that groups will meet, they will have this honeymoon period where they have this beautiful, that type of work, and then it sours as time goes on, kind of like marriage or something. And then, people start not appreciating certain comments or whatever, and suddenly they have to be careful about what they say, and then it gets ugly, and then they all kind of resent each other. That's not good. So some groups have very strict policies. They're just like, we come here and we speak very professionally, like we are in an orchestra, and we don't get too personal and all that stuff. And some groups will get really personal. And I think, like for me and Ray, I consider us kind of a chamber ensemble in a certain respect. And we are both aware that we can say anything to each other, but we're also aware that what you say could create a very large conversation that doesn't need to happen. And so you have to balance those things and just be thoughtful about why you're going to say something. That's really what it is. So I hope that helps. But I think we have to stop. But thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. All right.